Hello and welcome to this session on exam technique. We're going to have a look at Section A questions. So our exam paper is the Early Tudors paper and our syllabus is OCR Y106. And in this presentation we'll have a look at how questions are structured and then we'll have a look at the main sections of answers. So we'll have a look at introductions, main body paragraphs and also our conclusion. So our Section A questions are worth 30 marks out of 50 available marks on the paper. We won't get a choice and we recommend that we're spending anywhere up to 50 to close to an hour on these questions. This really is the main section of our examination and the question tests AO1 and AO2. So our examiner is looking to see historical knowledge and understanding and also is testing our use of evidence too. So for 30 marks, our question needs to have various features. So we need to produce a short introduction, given the direction of our answer, 4 main paragraphs, 1 for each source, and it's very important that each one of those paragraphs ends with an interim judgment, or what we've been calling a mini conclusion. And ideally, our answer also finishes with a summary conclusion too. And in this presentation, we'll have a look at each of those sections. So the questions will be phrased as follows. Using these 4 sources in the historical context, assess how far they support the view that, and then we'll have a view presented to us to evaluate. We can be quite confident that, give or take a few words here or there, that's how our questions are definitely going to be structured, so we know what to prepare for. So before we get underway, let's have a look at some guidance from the exam board on how to do well in this paper. So the exam board's given us guidance that students who do well consider the provenance of sources, so that's the sources' place in history, and use relevant contextual knowledge to analyse them. They record that successful students consider the validity of views that are presented in sources, and finally that an overall judgment is reached. So what we're going to try to do is to present some specific techniques that we can weave into our answers to make sure that each one of those features is present in our answers. So the paper itself will look something like this. So section A will be laid out with our question at the top. Remember, no choice of question. An indication that it's worth 30 marks. And then a collection of sources. So we'll have 4 in total. There'll be written evidence and there'll be primary sources. They won't be pictures and they won't be interpretations from later historians. So in order to write as efficiently as possible, we're going to have to carefully prepare the sources before we get underway. Our question's at the top there in the beige box, and you can see we've presented source A. We won't demonstrate preparation for each of the sources, we'll just do it for one source, so we'll take the first one. So our first move is going to be to prepare our thoughts around the provenance of the source. So in this case, we've got a letter from the Privy Council being addressed to Mary. And here are the kind of things that I might notice and just note down at the side of my question paper. I'm going to want to note down that I'm going to know what the Privy Council is and what its function was, that it was the executive body. And at this point, they're trying to prevent Mary from succeeding to the throne. So the purpose of the source is quite clear. And that's going to colour the validity of the claims that it makes. Similarly, at this point, John Dudley was dominating the council and was broadly in control. But I might show some awareness too that even at this stage, some of the Catholic councillors were for Mary succeeding to the throne, but were being carefully controlled. So this is all relevant contextual information that's going to affect the validity of the source, and these are the kind of thoughts I might have. So I'm just going to note down in short bullet point form at the side, these are the kind of things that I know about the Privy Council at this stage. My next move is to find up to 3 quotes that I could use in my answer when analysing the source. These are sections that I could use to expand on and show my own knowledge. So the first one that catches my eye is the claim that our sovereign Lady Queen Jane is possessed of the crown. So I'd underline that, and then I'd note down again some short bullet point notes about where I might go with that. So I might expand on exactly who Lady Jane Grey was and what her claim to the throne was. I might make a reminder to myself that she's married to Guildford Dudley, the son of the Lord Protector, and that might be relevant. And that even at an early stage, the proclamation of Lady Jane Grey as Queen was unpopular and wasn't accepted by the population. So those are some or all of the things that I'll use when I'm expanding on that section. My second quote could be that the late King Edward's letters were signed with his own hand. Now I recognise this as a reference to the device to alter the succession. I also know that this was only achieved by threatening and intimidation of councillors, but I know that it was signed by a number of other important people, but there was reluctance to sign the device. So those are the kind of points that I might use and expand upon. So again, this is just a short bullet point list of the odd word here or there. And then I'd repeat the process for my last quote. And you can see that I'm interested in the fact that the claim is that it's confirmed by Acts of Parliament 1534 and 1537 and a declaration that Mary is illegitimate. And again, you can see that I've just noted down the kind of things that I might be talking about when I'm expanding on that quote and analysing what's presented. Now I'm going to repeat that exercise for each of the 4 sources, each time noting down some interesting or salient points about the source provenance, and then identifying before I start writing up to 3 quotes per source about specific aspects I will expand on and analyse. The last thing that I'm going to do for each source is to briefly summarise, and I'm going to note down whether or not the source largely supports or opposes the view. Now I think that source A opposes the view. It does suggest that the issue of the succession threatened political stability. And I'm also going to note down and give it a star rating, maybe out of 3, for how important the source is. And I can use that when I'm discussing the source provenance. So when I've got to the stage that I've prepped each source, I've gone through, I've identified the quotes I'm interested in expanding on. At that point, I'm going to decide on the running order of the sources. Now there's nothing wrong with just going straight through from A for my first paragraph, B for the second, C for the third, and D for the fourth. That's absolutely fine. But what you can also do, showing slightly more engagement with the sources as a collection, is to decide on a running order which is slightly different. So one way I could do this is to have an order of paragraphs based on how far they support the view. And having prepped them, the running order, if I was to do this, would be my first paragraph would be C, my second D, my third B, and my fourth A. We could also order our paragraphs based on the provenance of the sources. And at this point, the evaluations that we made of the importance of the sources could come into play. Using this method, I would be writing firstly on source A, my second paragraph would be B, my third D, and my fourth source C. Now each of these running orders is absolutely fine. We're not picking up or losing marks. However, if we do decide to change the order of our paragraphs based on level of support or by using the provenance of the sources, we are showing slightly more engagement with the sources as a collection, and the points that we make will flow slightly easier, so it is recommended if we can. Okay, let's have a look at how introductions can be structured. Now our introduction really needs to do two jobs. It needs to give a direction for our answer as a whole, and also to lay out the running order of the sources. So on the screen you can see the first half of an introduction that gives an idea of the direction, and the second half of the introduction gives a short summary of each source, and the order that I mention them is going to be the running order of the sources in my answer. Before we have a look at the main body paragraphs, let's just remind ourselves on what the examiner is looking for from us. So in our paragraphs, we're looking to consider the provenance of the sources. We're looking to discuss the validity of the sources using our contextual knowledge. And we're also looking to reach judgments. Try to bear those three features in mind as we have a look at a paragraph. Now remember, in the examination, we'll be sitting with a fully prepped source in front of us, with notes on provenance and the quotes that we're going to use already identified. So here's how our paragraph would start. Now the key features of each paragraph you can see on the left-hand side. We're looking to present specific quotes. We're looking to place them in context. We're looking to analyse the provenance of the source. We're looking for sustained analysis, and we're going to finish our paragraph with an interim judgment, a mini conclusion. So this is how I would expand on our first quote, which you can see we've presented towards the start of the paragraph. It's then developed with contextual knowledge, and the claim that's made is then evaluated towards the end. The second quote would follow much the same format. Now I can only fit so much on a screen, so you need to imagine this is one long paragraph that's being written here. This all hangs together as one paragraph. And you can see roughly the same formula, right? You can see there's a quote that's expanded on, and I've analysed that, I've weighed it against my own knowledge, evaluating how serious the threat was. And then exactly the same for the third quote. I present the quote and then I've unpacked it. Before we finish our paragraph, let's have a look at how we can analyse provenance successfully. So on this slide you can see some moves to make, some recommended moves, and also some moves to avoid. So what we're looking for are contextualised statements. So by that I mean how the nature of the source or the author of the source impacts on the specific question that you're looking at. We're also looking to judge specific aspects of tone, considering the purpose of the source, and we're going to try to avoid rejection of the source on basis of bias. So you can see on the right hand side some of the weaker statements that could be made when we're analysing provenance. So we're trying to be specific and we're trying to be sustained. We're trying to keep our question in mind. So that can make it quite hard to prepare for this, because just preparing generic statements about source use will get us so far, but it's only by looking at the specifics of the question that we can make really strong analysis. So let's have a look at how our analysis of provenance might work at the end of our paragraph. And again, I'd be referring back to my short bullet point list of potential points that I might make here. Now remember, this isn't a separate paragraph. This is just a continuation of our previous slides. Now the last thing that our paragraph needs to have is a short mini conclusion, an interim judgment. And at this point, we're pulling together some of the main themes that we've covered within our paragraph. Now it's particularly important that we do this. Our answer can't get into the top band of marks if our work lacks judgments. So our answer would then continue following that same format. We would write 3 further paragraphs looking at each source in turn. And at the end, we would write a short conclusion. Now this conclusion would contain a judgment. It would unpack the sources that support the view, and then also the sources that challenge. At this point, we're not introducing much new. We might just be commenting on themes that have emerged in the course of our answer. So before we finish, let's just return to some key points. Our introduction gives our decision and the running order of sources. Our answer has 4 main paragraphs which consider content and provenance. Each paragraph ends with a mini conclusion that links back to the specifics of the question. And finally, we present a balanced conclusion which summarises the collection of sources.